Okay, very good. Welcome. This is the Red Hook Town Board meeting of October 25th, 2017. Would you be kind enough to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Steve, for the folks at home, I posted up on the screen, as we always do, the agenda items that we'll be covering tonight. So that you can make an informed determination whether or not you want to hang on for the whole thing. We hope that you do. Okay, very good. I think we're all set with that. We have just a few announcements today. First of all, I'd like to let you know, the folks at home, that we did receive our Greenway grant last week at the FDR Library. Was their quarterly meeting, and the grant is to update our zoning code as it relates to large-scale commercial extractive operations. And we want to thank Dennis Colley, who I think is going to be joining us in a little while, for our solar presentation, and Paula Schoonmaker, who assisted me in writing the grant a few months ago. We wouldn't be able to do much of what we do here if it were not for the volunteers and all the grant funding that we receive from our partners. Another exciting announcement is the governor signed yesterday legislation that actually determines tanker avoidance zones on the Hudson River. For those of you who have been following the debate about whether or not the Hudson should be used for 43 anchor sites, the governor has signed this legislation, which gives the state much more control over what transpires in that corridor. And so we'll be talking about, again, solar zoning later on, and encouraging solar. Obviously, one way to avoid things like tankers on your river is to make that transition to clean energy sources. We have with us Kim from the Red Hook Chamber to talk about one of our announcements, which is the Chocolate Festival. It's coming up November 4th, one of the most popular events that we have here in our community. And Kim, would you like to say a few words about that? Please, if you would.
Yes, so Saturday, November 4th, from 11 to 4, we have the 4th annual Red Hook and the Chocolate Festival taking place in the village of Red Hook. And we've got all kinds of fun things going on as usual. It's looking like a pretty big turnout so far. I mean, I have people who are registering for it, and the numbers are really big right now. So we've got a chocolate wars competition, we've got live music in the streets, we've got chocolate tastings, chocolate demos. There's so much happening. We have vendors, and just fun for everybody. Most of the businesses in the village of Red Hook are participating as well. They have mini events going on in their own businesses, so it's an exciting day.
That's great. And I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you mention the hours that the
11 to 4.
11 to 4,
Yes.
okay.
On Saturday the 4th.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Kim, because it's an event that she really spearheads, and thank you so much for all the work that you do at the Chamber. Another announcement is we want to remind you, of course, that Election Day is coming up. That's Tuesday, November 7th. The polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's your normal polling location. There has not been any recent changes in that. And of course, we congratulate all individuals who put their names forward for consideration. The last item for the announcement is that the Red Hook Central School District has a vote, which I believe is being set for December 5th on the auditorium project. Is that right? We have Steve Appenzeller who's here, who's involved with the Education Foundation. Did you want to say anything more, Steve, or should we?
There will be a public information session held November 15th at the Mill Road School, and that will be an opportunity for everyone to get more information about the project and also for a public question and answer period. I don't have the exact hours, but I think it's from 7 to 9 p.m.
Okay, very good. So we'll get all the information of how much state funding. We heard about the grant that Kevin Cahill was able to obtain for $3.5 million and so on and so forth. So you'll fill us in, or they'll fill us in at the time, and we'll get to understand the local contribution for that project before the vote. Very good.
So all of the details, including financing, will be covered at that meeting.
Okay, terrific. Well, that's a good segue, I think, into our next item, which is a public hearing. We had scheduled for 7:35. We're running a little bit late, but we do expect it to be a pretty quick public hearing, judging by the attendance today. It's regarding our adopted preliminary budget. It's the 2018 budget. If you were here with us about a month ago or so, we had a few slides just to highlight some of the key points of the 2018 budget. Once again, it keeps taxes flat, the same as the previous budget. The household impact is unchanged from 2017. You might actually experience a slight decrease. Of course, if there's anything that changes the assessment on your particular property, that might then have another impact. Fund balances, credit rating, all going up. Our risk assessment by the Controller's Office is lower. You can see last year our credit rating was increased. And this year, the Controller's local fiscal stress report shows us nearly perfect with a stress factor of 1.7%. And that is an improvement over 7.9% back in 2015. This budget takes into account that we are and will continue to be making investments in the community. That includes the Route 9 sidewalks, which I'm happy to say will be completed, we expect by the end of next week. Town Hall parking lot, hopefully you've noticed the great work that's been done there. Improvements to not only our existing recreational parks and playgrounds, but also we are finally addressing that expansion project across the road on Linden Avenue. The land we acquired nearly a decade ago. We have received a lot of grant funding. We are also appropriating money in the future and have accounted for all of that in the 2018 and draft 2019 budgets. We are also appropriating money to retrofit this campus to make it more efficient, including insulation, changing out our 1985 heating and ventilation and air conditioning equipment, and also putting solar on the highway garage. We've had, this budget is possible with all the work of our dedicated employees and volunteers, and certainly by addressing some inefficiencies. Not least of which, we've had all these grants listed up here, the dollar amounts. They are not a comprehensive list, but they are just an example of grant monies on projects that we are currently working on. Staffing, we've reorganized here, so we're saving about $50,000 per year on that. We refinanced quite a bit of our debt last year, which has given us quite a bit of savings. You see the figure up there that was projected when we refinanced. Lower utility costs, our municipal solar farm project, which is moving ahead nicely, is projected to save the taxpayers over the life of the 25 years, $1.5 million more. We are converting our streetlights to LED. That's another savings, not only for all of the taxpayers, but especially those who live in lighting districts. And that's sort of a summary of the highlights of the preliminary adopted budget. So at this time, I would like to open the public hearing, and with the announcement, Sue?
Notice of public hearing, Town of Red Hook. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held by the Town Board of the Town of Red Hook on October 25th, 2017 at 7:35 p.m. local time at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York, to hear all interested persons on a preliminary budget for the 2018 calendar year for the Town of Red Hook. All interested persons will be given an opportunity to be heard in person or by directing comments in writing to the Town Board, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York. All reasonable accommodations will be made for persons with disabilities. In such case, please notify the town clerk in advance at the above address or by phone 845-758-4606 so that arrangements can be made. Please take further notice that copies of said preliminary budget are available for inspection by any interested party during the town clerk's office hours Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 p.m. at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York. The compensation to be paid to the following officers is as follows. Supervisor, $30,094. Each town board member receives $8,449. Town clerk, $54,320. Town justices each, $17,374. Highway superintendent, $63,796. And this was by order of the town board, Sue McCann, town clerk, Town of Red Hook. And the preliminary budget has been posted on our website. That's it.
Thank you very much, Sue.
You're welcome.
At this time, I would like to take any comments. Would anybody like to speak to the proposed 2018 budget? Todd? Yes, please.
Hi, Todd Baywright, Town of Red Hook. I want to thank all of you and congratulate you on, 2 years in a row? Flat, no increase? It's awesome. It's really great. So, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
I'm wondering, are you...
I thought you were punking me the other day.
He's running for office.
Todd, are you available twice a month, second Tuesday and fourth Wednesday for a repeat performance?
No, when you told me the other day, I thought you were messing with me.
No,
That's
it's
great.
all good,
That's
it's all
great.
good.
Super.
Okay.
And the money that you showed 125,000 or so savings on the loan, is that interest, savings and interest, you reworked it. Is that annual?
No,
Or is
that's
that over?
That was the life, over the life of the series of those bonds,
Okay.
yes. So we will refinance some of our serial bonds, and we will generate, we actually think more than that number, because interest rates did start to move up after we refinanced them. We got a rate around 2% for the bonds.
Excellent.
So we were smart to do that last year. So, yeah.
Very nice. Thanks
Well,
again.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay, would anybody else like to comment on that? Very good, okay. Hearing no other comments.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Well, okay, very good. Faster than I can calculate. I would just like to say that it's very important that we continue to work to keep taxes down in our community if we want folks of all economic levels to live here, and we really appreciate all the work that all of you do out there, and all the work that our employees do and our volunteers do for no compensation, and some of us for practically no compensation, because it's very important, and we want to have these dollars, any savings that we can make, we want to have so that we can consider things like auditoriums and renovating our recreational facilities, you know, that type of an investment. So we thank you all for your contributions. Okay, any further discussion? If not, to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. Okay, we'll take up the vote in just a few minutes on the budget, but before then, I'd like to take some public comments. So, Todd, do I think you're gonna be coming back up here again by any chance?
Hi, Todd Baywright again, Town of Red Hook. Here tonight on behalf of the EDC, the Committee of the Town, and in the spirit of collaboration and continual improvement, what we'd like to do is ask to be put on the agenda for next month And we're concerned, and maybe the examples we've used are just, as I was away a couple of meetings and I was surprised to see the letter came and, we'd like to speak next month about efficiencies and, like I said, continual improvement and what, maybe figure out a way that we can, I know in my business we use surveys, we use comment cards continually. My customers are emailed comment cards. I'm on a couple of other boards at my college. We sent a survey around to see, because a survey may help. So we're going to suggest a survey next month because that just seems to be a good way to get information from a group, good and bad, and it sort of can be viewed like a scorecard. So we're going to suggest that next month and have a discussion about how can we help, what things can we do to make the process for application, the planning process, and hopefully moving to approvals or denials in the most efficient and effective way possible, in keeping with, of course, all of our codes and rules and laws and green space and whatnot. So that's all for tonight. Thanks.
Very good. Kenny,
I'm
I
gonna
see you
do
behind them. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just along with those, I'm before the planning board right now on a project that I'm doing, and I'm not having any problem with them, but it seems like some people are, and it seems like sometimes when you're talking about economics and the extended time that people have to go through to get the process of having projects done can be costly. So we're hoping to bring that time frame down and get it, like Todd said, more efficient.
And maybe some of the costs.
And the cost.
Maybe
So,
some of the costs.
thank you.
Very good. So we received your letter, and I don't want you to think that we ignored it. So I wanted to tell you a couple things. When I was at the Greenway last week, I chatted with Owen Rafter, who's the Commissioner of Planning at Dutchess County. They have a municipal innovation grant that they've just funded, which I was interested in if Red Hook could piggyback on. It's 2 townships, a city, and the county itself. So it's the city of Poughkeepsie, town of Rhinebeck, town of Hyde Park, and Dutchess County that are doing this grant, which is called Streamlining Land Use Development Process. Does that sound like what we're talking about here?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the bad news is Owen said, no, you can't get in this one. But don't worry, you don't need to, because the purpose of the grant is to look at the processes in these municipalities and develop a template that can be given to all of the Dutchess County communities in order to get to the goal of what you just expressed, and a concern that we, by the way, have also expressed here as a town board. So I guess what I would say is that's good news. The idea of, we do so much work on zoning, and the idea is that once you've articulated kind of what you want, you being the collective community, the consensus, because obviously it is about consensus, then you should be encouraging that to move through quickly, because applicants should be coming to you with projects that are consistent with it, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. One thing we do offer, and it's important if you're watching at home and you're coming into town hall and you want to do a subdivision or you want to do a project that requires site plan approval, is that we do offer what's called a pre-conference, pre-application conference. And it oftentimes is helpful, where you can just sit down with the planner, with a representative from the planning board, and just have a conversation about what it is you're contemplating before you shell out too much time and money, to see if you're headed in the quote-unquote right direction. So we would encourage folks to do that. We certainly would encourage some type of survey that would help us understand what folks who want to do business in our community are looking for, and how we can improve that experience for them. And obviously, we would like to see the fruition of this grant process and what that yields, so. That's just a little bit of information. Did you want to say more, Tom?
Did they discuss the time frame? Is it 6 months,
You know,
year, or?
they didn't, but I could get some more information for you. I'm sure there's an RFP process. I mean, if I had to guess, we're talking months, but I couldn't tell you how much. But I'll see if I can get a feel for that when I speak to Owen again about this. And I can do that between now and your next EDC meeting, if that would be helpful. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Should we make sure we have them on the agenda for next month? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, sure. Do you wanna, somebody wanna stay in touch with Dick? We'll send a note, and then we'll figure out if you wanna be on the 14th or our 20, whatever that is, meeting in November. So you all settle on when you'd like to come, and certainly we would be happy to put you on the agenda.
Right.
Does that work?
It's, the 22nd is
Okay.
Thanksgiving.
Right, so we're gonna have to figure out when our second November meeting is, because it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and something tells me, as much as you wanna streamline, you probably don't wanna come the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So when we know our next meeting, in November, we'll obviously let you know that in the option. Okay, any other public comments? Okay, Kenny, yeah?
Yeah, I want to revisit the conversation I had last time about Freeborn Lane.
Yeah.
Have you discussed it or looked at it at all?
We have not. I think what will happen probably is that it'll be a topic that we'll have a decision on next year, not this year. There's a time frame for making a decision, and I think that time frame is coming up, at least the annual determination, whether it's going to remain on the inventory of our local roads. We're still looking into it.
Right,
So I think by next year, maybe we'll have next
Okay.
year's time frame.
but I feel I should be part of that decision.
Yeah, we haven't
Okay.
even gotten to that point yet. We're
Okay.
still looking into the legal aspects of it.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
No, thank you, Ken. All right, very good. Any other public comments? All right, thank you so much. So the first item on the agenda is the 2018 budget. It is up for consideration tonight for adoption as a final budget. We have our wonderful bookkeeper, Ann Conway, with us. Ann and I have been working on this budget for an embarrassingly long time now, 4 months and change. And she's here to answer any questions you might have on the budget, mostly for the folks at home. We did have a very lengthy budget workshop here. Okay, the town board members have any questions or comments about the budget before we vote on it?
I need to do the tax cap.
Okay, very good. Ann is gonna go and make sure it complies with the tax cap. That's a formality, because I think we all know it's gonna comply with the tax cap.
Should we really pass it tonight? We have, we're a month in advance.
Well, Harry, we only have one scheduled meeting before the deadline for passing it, and since there are no questions and no comments about the budget, and everybody seems to be pretty happy about it, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't consider it.
This is the
for a
first
vote.
time it will be on TV, and if people look at it, they will be preempted from making any comment, the public.
Okay, well, just to clarify, and I don't mean to correct you, but it was put on TV September 27th, both this presentation and a notification that the budget was available. It's been available on the town's website
It's on
now
the website, I'm aware of it.
for a month. It was also presented to the folks, the highlights of the budget back on September 27th. All right. Well, we are going to get certification from Ann in just a minute. Does anybody want to say anything about the budget before we go ahead and vote?
I'll just say I'm really happy with it. I think the team here did a really great job working on it. Based on what I saw, we have these big binders of information that we get every year that have a lot of things besides the actual budget. It has a lot of analysis to it, and we do have a lot of projects that we're going to be working on in the future that we'll need to bond for, so, and it makes some people nervous, but Robert and Ann and others have really done a great job showing how we are still well within our healthy borrowing limits, and so I feel really good about, I feel really confident about our financial position after looking at this, and I feel happy that we're going to be able to pursue some of these projects, some of which, you know, have been on the planning horizon for, you know, quite some time. Some of them are deferred maintenance, like the tennis court rebuild, or even, you know, the new playground update. There's projects, we're not bonding for the website, but you know, the website cost is in there. There's a lot of exciting things, you know, keeping up with our highway trucks. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more put into the road maintenance line. I know we've talked about that in the past. So I'm hoping that this year we could really look at those numbers and figure out how we can make sure that we're really confident there too, because I would say that's the only area that we are maybe underfunding based on the advice we've been given at this point. I mean, in my view, that's what I would say. So
Okay.
otherwise, I'm really happy with this year's budget.
Okay, terrific. Any other comments?
No, I agree with Sarah.
Okay. Ann, how do we look?
We're submitted.
We're submitted.
We're under the tax cap.
Very good. All right, who would like to make a motion?
So
that we
moved.
approve? Thank you very much, Bill. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, and I know Jim was very much in favor of approving the budget. He wishes he could be here with us tonight, but he's doing some continuing ed, which is very good for a dentist to be doing continuing ed, I think, don't you?
Sure.
All right, so the next item on the agenda that we have is just a resolution. There's the subdivision, DMAJS subdivision, and as always, we need to sign off on proposed name for the road.
What's DMAJS stand for?
I don't know, it's the acronym, but it's
It's gonna be Doug.
It's Doug Struwinski.
Andrew,
Oh, okay.
Jackie,
Okay,
Struwinski.
okay.
The whole Strawinsky.
That's right.
That's it,
Yeah.
all right.
okay, and I believe this is
I'm
a
aware of it.
subdivision of a couple of lots between Birchwood and Cedar Drive.
Cherrywood.
And the name is proposed to be Cherrywood, and I think that's a name that is not in conflict with what we have. And I guess it's consistent with the tree theme that's in Forest Park. So move, okay. Bill is so moving.
Second.
This would be, we need a resolution number.
69.
69, resolution 69, accepting street name for the DMAJS Associates LLC subdivision, and Bill so moves.
I'll second that.
And it's seconded by Sarah once again, all in favor.
Should we should that include the name that's to be in of the street?
It's included in
Cherrywood.
that resolution, Harry, I just spoke about it, it's Cherrywood.
Number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I haven't seen the resolution.
Cherrywood Lane.
Okay,
Okay,
you got that?
okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Item number 3 is solar zoning, I think. Let's see, what else do we have on the agenda for tonight? If we have something that's quicker than we do, skip around just a little bit. Okay. So let's, if we could, let's just jump to 4 and 5. They're gonna be quicker than item number 3, because that's a Q&A session. So item number 4 is a resolution authorizing participation in the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. So as you know, we are working towards transitioning our streetlights to LED, and as part of it, we are working with other communities in order to do so, to take advantage of those economies of scale. Our attorney has been working with the consortium to draft an intermunicipal agreement, of which you've been provided a copy of. That is to ensure that we work nicely together and fairly. And so, did you have any questions about it? I can tell you that Chris and I have been on the phone for, I don't know, umpteen hours going over wordsmithing. It's a wonderful project.
Not on this.
Not on this in
On the
particular, but on the
RFP,
whole,
right.
as Harry would say, kit and caboodle.
I would note that this, the purpose of this is to provide that this town is serving as lead participant in a group of municipalities that the consortium has put together and is still working to assemble that are expected to help the towns achieve savings in the proposed lighting acquisition project, the acquisition of the services for managing the lighting system. That's the purpose of the consortium, and the consortium is a group that's, the staffing is funded by NYSERDA. They have a group of folks that are working with the towns to help put this all together. So they prepared the base documents here, and we're reviewing and commenting and trying to make sure it fits in with our procurement policy and that sort of thing.
We don't have a list of the towns
We
yet.
do have a list of
We
the
do
towns.
have a draft, it'll be finalized probably in a month, but it's some of the towns that I mentioned at our last meeting. It's both our villages, Red Hook and Tivoli. It's the village and town of New Paltz. We have Rosendale, and then the list goes on from there.
How many altogether?
Well, it hasn't been decided yet. Rhinebeck is looking at it.
Tivoli has approved a resolution to join this. There are a couple of other ones outside of sort of the sort of near-in ones. There's Townsend, I think, and Bedford. So these are communities that have been identified by the consortium as benefiting from participation in the group, and the consortium has recommended a larger group on the theory that the more that are involved, the more we would be an attractive group. That's their recommendation to us. Okay.
I would consider that an important aspect of it is that the group be fairly cozy geographically. Bedford's quite a distance from here.
Yeah.
It's well over an hour.
Yep. Well, again, that would be up to the vendor if they wanted
Yeah.
to bid on that kind of work. You know, when you do a streetlight transformation project, driving an hour, you know, for a few weeks to do a community might be worth it for the vendor. And again, we don't really know
It's the maintenance part of it.
if it's successful.
So, right, Bedford and Bethel, Chatham, Hillsdale, Hurley, Ankrum, in addition to Marbletown, the New Paltzes, Pelham, Plattekill, Rhinebeck, Red Hook, Rosendale, Tivoli, Tustin, and Ulster, town of Ulster. So they're not all signed up, they're all invited essentially by the consortium to consider participating to enlarge the group. Okay.
Correct. Were there any questions about the IMA itself? Okay. So we have resolution number 70, if we're ready to consider it. It's a resolution authorizing participation in the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. And Harry, I know you're going to be our point person on picking those LEDs, so would you like to make a motion to approve this resolution?
Yeah. Is there a part of it I can read maybe?
You can if you like,
I
it's
don't
not
need to.
necessary though, yeah, I think it's
Okay.
just a,
All right. We have a resolution authorizing participation in the Mid-Hudson Street Lighting Consortium, and I assume we'll move that we move forward with participating in this.
very good, thank you very much, Harry. I'll second your motion It's a resolution, and it's basically approval of the IMA agreement. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Item number 5 on the agenda. As part of this process, we were taking a look at our procurement policy, and we noticed our piggybacking language could be beefed up a little bit. So you received, I think, a little while back, proposed tweaks or changes to our procurement policy and what those changes were, so that there was language that we could utilize for our purchasing. It's resolution number 71. Were there any questions about the changes in the policy? Okay, very good. I would like to move that we approve resolution number 71. It's approving amended Town of Red Hook purchasing and procurement policy, and whereby a proposed amended policy has been submitted to the town board, and such proposed procurement policy is on file with the town clerk, and that it's in accordance with section 104-B of general municipal law. Okay, very good. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.
When will those changes take place?
I believe they are effective when filing.
Yep, they're effective now.
They're
It's not a
effective
local law.
immediately.
When will the department head see them?
Would you like to have them?
Yeah.
So these are just minor adjustments to, in particular, make clear that the piggybacking is part of our policy. We have been, I think, relying on the statutory authorization for piggybacking, but we felt that it was a good idea to include that language in our policies to make it clear that that was something that was permitted, because we thought that was a little bit of a gap, and a couple of other clarifying changes like that. You can have this copy if you want, here.
You have another one, Chris?
Yeah, here you go. And 3 seconds into black line tomorrow, okay?
Okay.
Yep,
Okay, and this,
This one?
that's right.
and this draft was reviewed by our purchasing manager, Ted Cudsey. Okay, very good. So now we are back to item number 3, which is solar zoning. As we discussed, there's a draft after about 1.5 years of work. We have many folks to thank for this draft, not the least of which is Dennis Colley, who's been sort of the point person on collating thoughts from the various committees, whether it's the task force and other committees, and putting together sort of a layman's draft. After that time period, and a few months ago, that draft was sent to our planner, Ted Fink, and Ted was able to take the thoughts and the policy and put it into words that conform with our zoning code, and Ted is kind enough, as you requested, to join us here tonight, so that we could not only have another presentation, but also to answer your questions that you might have.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, should we discuss Stephen's appointment really quick, or do you?
Oh. Oh,
Maybe he wants to stay for the
actually,
solar
Stephen
zone.
is here for solar zoning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, good.
so very good.
Great.
But thank you for thinking of him
Well,
and the
Christine,
fact that he
yeah.
may want to
Yeah.
cut out earlier. So, Ted, Dennis. Very good.
Okay, thank you, Penny Colley, Town of Red Hook, Energy Czar. No, actually,
Well, that was immodest, wasn't it?
Energy Committee.
You know what's happened to ours.
Well, we value our volunteers, so.
Is that the C document that I just did? No. Can you put up the C document, please? There it says,
Did you
I
send
sent
it
it to the community, and there should be one,
I don't see it, let me refresh.
please.
No. That's all I got.
Ah,
So
That's,
can we
that's
work
embarrassing.
from your earlier version?
uh,
And we can just, if there's something, some quotes you have to correct, we could correct those.
Well, it
verbally.
wasn't something I wanted to correct, it was something I wanted to add.
Oh, okay.
That was a compelling piece of information about, I can just read it
Okay.
so that you understand. But again, thank you for asking us to refresh this, have an opportunity to revisit both the presentation and the draft, now that you've had adequate time to review the content. So if there are any additional questions that you have, please be free to ask Ted or myself. Actually, that's not correct English, Ted or me,
Okay.
and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may still have. So I'll go relatively quickly through the things that you've already seen. Our goals remain the same. We're looking for encouraging projects in, and I think the operative term here is appropriate locations, and with appropriate guidelines to be able to regulate how solar is going to be implemented in the town. Promote our primary issue is to be able to promote solar technology while protecting agricultural, rural, and historic character of the town. And then this point about adding resiliency to the power grid, I did include a slide about that was referenced an example that the task of rebuilding Puerto Rico's power grid is expected to take months and cost as much as $5 billion. In light of that, Tesla basically offered to bring online solar in the space of 3 weeks to be able, for the Children's Hospital in a remote area. Well, actually not a remote area, it's in San Juan's Hospital del Nino, the Children's Hospital, and it took 3 weeks for them to do that. They have roughly 3,000 young people that are there as part of the patients in the Children's Hospital, and 30 disabled residents who could not go anywhere else. And so this is an example of where solar is going to provide that resiliency that will be able to substitute. They expect, as I say, the power grid is going to take months for them to rebuild. And here, within 3 weeks, they were able to turn the hospital back on. Not that I expect that that in the town of Red Hook we're going to have those kinds of urgencies, hopefully, but with the issues of climate change, it's clear that being prepared and having this additional power independence that would be provided by large solar systems, this would be something to keep in mind as we go through the adoption of this kind of zoning legislation. Okay, so moving on quickly, the New York State Town Law section, we kind of look at the authority for why we would pass this legislation, and that comes not just from our local decision-making body, but New York State Town Law, section 263, states that we must encourage local adoption of renewable energy. And again, this concept of with reasonable consideration as to the character of the district and the suitability. So that's what we're hoping to do within the context of this zoning legislation, is to take, understand the importance of both the cultural and environmental considerations, as well as the need for being able to have energy independence. We can go. Okay, you can feel free anytime you want to jump in.
okay. Yeah, no, so far so good.
Okay.
So again, just quickly, we have roof mounted, building integrated, and ground mounted. And the ground mounted are either pole mounted typically or a fixed array.
Okay.
Now we're getting into the areas of permitted locations. So what we've changed in this presentation, as you'll see momentarily, is that we showed some overlay of the town to be able to illustrate when we say things like ground-mounted systems are prohibited in the TNDH, HLO, B1, and WC zoning districts, you'll get an idea, you'll be able to visualize what that really implies in terms of restricting solar, large and medium-scale solar in our town. The rest is
Self-explanatory.
self-explanatory. So.
Okay, site plan review, and the large ones also require special use permits, okay?
That's correct.
All right.
So,
Is it appropriate to ask questions at this point, or should we wait and let you do?
no, I think you should ask questions as we go along. If there's, I mean,
Okay,
just let me get, that hopefully I'll be able to get to the end of the presentation.
sure, okay.
I have questions relating to this. It's in the zoning language, not in this.
Okay. Well, maybe, did you get through your presentation
Well,
if we're gonna
well,
go to
let-
language?
Well, let me, actually,
ahead,
maybe it
keep
would be
going.
better for me to just,
Keep
you know, take you through it, and, because it's gonna be relatively short, and then we'll go back and revisit, and maybe Ted and possibly Chris will be able to answer any questions about the terminology. So, in the ABD district, we are restricting ground-mounted systems to not be installed on important farmlands, which is defined as having prime soil or soils of statewide importance. So they're kind of a synonymous definition, right? New York State Ag and Markets
I
permits.
have a question about, in the ag business district, farms also have ag and markets has restrictions.
If you read the next bullet, it addresses that. So New York State Ag and Markets permits on-farm systems that generate up to 110% of annual total electric needs without siting or view shed restrictions. And I mention that because we do not regulate, they supersede any regulation that we would have on town on what they can do on their farm. And their regulation just simply says that it has to be within 110% of their annual total electric needs. Now, that means that they can site it right next to the road, right in public view. It doesn't really matter. So what we're addressing from local legislation is those non-farm use, additional that could be primary use that would be commercial and so on. But we don't have the ability to restrict how a farmer sites their solar panels. No large ground-mounted systems shall be installed on a designated wetland. Well, that's self-explanatory, and there's a language about that. This is just an anecdotal note here. Only New York State can regulate utility scale 25 megawatts or larger. So it's kind of interesting that we're only able to do this regulation on, our small and our medium and large solar systems, but at a utility scale, we have no say at all. It's sort of like there are power lines coming down through our town and through our area. So that's an interesting, just a note that, what we're arguing over or potentially legislating is those potential developments in our town, independent of utility scale zoning. So here we go to the maps. This is just generally, this is the standard district map. Nobody's going to be able to read those, but it's just important to note a couple of things, and we'll show that momentarily. This here is the Water Conservation District. The greens is the, there's the RD5 Residential District. Then there's the ABD District, which I will show you an overlay that's just related to that, and so on. So this is how the town is divided up into the various districts. If you refer back to the areas where it's prohibited, and then look at these maps, we're going to be able to see what that means in terms of where it's going to be allowed. So this is the HLO district. That's these hash marks that are there. So at this particular point, ground-mounted systems are prohibited in the HLO. And the additional districts where it would not be eligible include the TND B1 and
Sorry.
WC. Okay, so the next slide. This is the ABD district. This is ABD, right? So these are the white is all the farmland, important farmland, prime and statewide important soils. And if you'll notice, I'll kind of explain what this red line is. This is the distribution line for the utility that would enable large solar and medium to some extent. What that means is three-phase lines that are going through, kind of lacing through here, are not available in areas like here, which might be 1.5 miles or so away from those distribution lines. So even if
These are all the three-phase lines that exist.
that's correct. These are the three-phase. This is the corridor coming up Route 9, I think.
Yeah, I can figure it out.
Yeah. So anyway, we can see that back if you kind of superimposed them. I was trying to superimpose them and then take things away, but I couldn't get that fancy. We can go to the next slide.
Okay, but just
Oh,
so we
well, okay,
understand.
so this is the ABD, this is ABD. These are the designated farmlands, prime and soil importance. There is an area here which was considered suitable for solar. However, there's a conservation easement on that property. So the areas that are in green, that are kind of surrounded by the prime farmland, are really terrain that is unsuitable both for solar, presumably, or obviously distant, where it wouldn't be desirable from a development standpoint to put in large-scale solar. All of this is really to illustrate that there are really very few parcels that would ultimately be suitable based on the legislation that we're proposing that would be suitable for large-scale solar.
So, just so I understand, so your point is that the solar is not gonna compete with the agriculture in the designated ABD?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, good. All right, next slide, is that what you want?
Please.
Okay.
So again, this is kind of obviously a satellite view with the ABD and where it is in perspective to the other locations. And again, if you look at these areas that are dense green, these are forest lands or terrain that is really unsuitable. A developer wouldn't want to do because it's on slopes or hillsides, either facing the wrong way or just not able to manage that. Next slide. So what we think, maybe this is a little presumptuous, we think that this was well thought out to encourage carefully targeted implementation. I keep going back to the question of where we would allow and where we wouldn't allow solar implementation. The selected medium and large solar systems provide opportunities for residents, and that's kind of the other essence of this. When we have large solar, and there are companies that are coming around looking to solicit pay participation in a solar farm, if for any reason you cannot apply solar on your property, and that includes, for example, the owner of a historic house, this would allow them to participate in this clean energy initiatives and be able to take advantage of that, those opportunities if we were to have large-scale solar in those areas where it's appropriate. So,
Very good.
I don't know if, Ted, did you want to add any comments or?
Well, I think, we're here to answer your questions. Maybe that's a good way to get out some of the different provisions that are built into the code and what some of the concerns are that have been expressed so far about the way it's been written. And, what can be done about it. So,
We'll leave it to you all. I think you had more questions than I did, but one thing I did notice, Bill, you had a series of questions, and it highlighted me to page 9 of the draft law, just to make sure that we were clear, because certainly the presentation was clear initially and then today, that when we are saying it is excluded on important farmland, we meant in the ABD. And so if you look at page 9, you should have a color copy of that, today's draft.
Albert, it came out on page 8 on mine.
Oh, it came out on page 8?
Yeah, yeah, first to the bottom of page 8.
Okay.
It's on page 9 and
Okay. You must have a longer piece of paper then.
You know, you used to give me, I think, a Word file.
Okay,
That sometimes, if you don't send it PDF,
okay,
the Word will,
Okay.
program will sometimes, the
Fine.
formatting
Okay.
comes out different.
right.
Yeah.
So in that one sentence there, I would suggest we include in the ABD, so it's explicit, and then remove the on non-farm parcels or words in that sentence, just so that it has the further clarity that you were looking for, Bill, and where the prohibition would be. Because obviously we wouldn't want to prohibit it on those soils on every single parcel, but certainly we would want to prohibit it in that very large district, but important district that we call the ABD. And,
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the comment. So in this version, I have something that is in blue
yes,
and then
the
something
blue
that
is
is in
inclusion
red.
and the red is suggested for
So
removal.
you mean that to be struck?
Yes. So it would read, a ground-mounted solar energy system shall not be installed on important farmland as defined in 143-4 in the ABD, except if on a farm where a farmland protection plan as defined in 143 has been prepared in accordance with the zoning law. So what that says is, in essence, is we wouldn't allow it on these types of soils unless it was within the pocket, the development pocket, that small pocket that they're granted, when they have a farmland protection plan and the rest of the farmland is under easement. And as you know, most of the farmland that we have in town now in the ABD is in fact under easement. And those easements prohibit any solar development in excess of that 110% that New York State says that they have a right to. So again, a very important point that the solar is not going to compete with the agriculture under this draft. I know that we've received some input from some conservation folks that they feel that this is, restrictive, but, all carefully targeted zoning does tend to sort of force development of whatever type into appropriate places if it's done to a significant degree,
So I just want to make sure that I understand what we're ending up with, which is if it's a ground-mounted solar system and it's on important farmland in the ABD and it's not on a farm.
there's
Not
no
allowed
language
in
about
ABD.
on a farm. There's no language on a farm in
Okay,
there.
so in my version that I'm reading here, it says if on a farm.
Or, I'm sorry, if on a farm, yeah,
So it says except if on a farm?
yes, except if on a farm where there's a farmland protection plan. So a conserved farm, yes, that's the language.
So the only, in other words, just to get that the intent is that if it's not on a farm, it's not permitted in the ABD? I just want to try to understand, we got a lot of sort of overlapping language in here.
No,
Where are you and what page?
It's,
Just reading this EBB,
Yes.
E1B.
this is district specific,
Right.
right?
I didn't see where it says.
Okay, so if it's not on a farm, it would not be allowed on those soils, important farmland,
Yeah,
okay? If it's on a farm and it's conserved, the only way it can be on those soils is if it's within the development, the designated development pocket.
Okay, I
Do you have a
think,
suggestion of how to
I think we
phrase
might
that
have to
sentence?
rephrase that a little bit, yeah, I do. Don't you, Ted?
Yeah.
Yeah,
do?
I think we gotta
Do
word
you
it
have
properly.
suggestions on how to phrase
Yeah,
that? Great,
I think that can be reworded. so it's
Okay.
clearer.
terrific.
Isn't
All right,
the-
there's a lot of questions though, I
But we
think
can
that's the
wordsmith
opportunity.
later as long as we understand the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you understand the intent. I mean, I think, I could be wrong, I was about to look it up, but the definition of important farmland in 143.4, I think it mentions ABD, like we may not need that.
It-
Whatever the definition is, I think it makes it clear what it is.
It does not mention ABD in the
Just
definition,
define
which is why we wanted to be sure it was clear in the zoning language.
But if it's statewide, prime or statewide important soils and it's not in the ABD, wouldn't you still not want ground-mounted solar on it?
No, because we've identified where we want to protect the agriculture. And if you look at the soil characteristics throughout our township, we wouldn't be able to develop anything. The best soils exist next to Holy Cow. So we've recognized that we can't preserve every soil characteristic throughout and every parcel. It would, and we do have a map of that, I don't know that it's up there, or we could take a look at it.
Yeah,
I
I
could probably pull it up, but
I
that
didn't
would
see
be,
a map that shows where we could put large scale. I guess that's what I would have liked to see, because I feel like
Well, we-
all those maps showed where we can't put it, right? But,
there's no
Well-
way to map it.
Well, so I think
well,
there's
possibilities,
two
you
wa-
know.
there's two ways to answer that, right? One is that there are properties, and I'll give an example, would be Sky Park, right? Which are not considered agricultural land and is perfectly suited to solar. And it would be able to probably host, 4 megawatts of solar power, which would be maybe 2/3 or more than a third of the population in terms of supporting as moving toward our goals. So it would be, I think it would have to be on a case-by-case basis as property owners are approached and as property becomes available for that to, I think what Sky Park is somewhere like right here, maybe.
Sky Park is down below that last.
Or
red
below
line.
the, oh, this.
It's part of that green that you
this-
see there?
this, yeah,
Part of that green, yeah.
yeah, so,
So like on these maps, there's no, I feel like there's no way to look at that map and know like how much saturation we're putting ourselves in for large scale solar. Am I wrong? Because you indicated that a lot of those green areas are not actually suitable.
That's right.
But are the green areas supposed to indicate where technically you could put solar according to the zoning, assuming the terrain is okay? Is that what the green area is supposed to show?
yeah, I think that the problem we're gonna have is, is that by restricting it to only the agricultural, to those areas that are not part of the agricultural business district, that are not the historic district and so on, we're going to reach a point where you're going to say, well, town of Red Hook, we're not gonna be able to put large-scale solar in that particular area. On the other hand, there is an opportunity at some point, right? Hopefully in the public hearing that there may be some language that's less restrictive, that there may be, some compelling arguments that says, okay, we have to rethink that portion of this legislation in a way where it's actually just considered based on a case-by-case basis. I'm for that, rather than arbitrarily just doing that. On the other hand, we have to start somewhere. In order for us to be able to get that, we need the public hearing. And then I think, based on the results of the public hearing and then a re-review by the town board, we'll come up with some kind of a workable solution for the town. I think that there are specific sites that are identifiable. Hopefully it's not just Sky Park.
And I think this law should very specifically identify where this can be built and where it cannot be built. so that people can, as they're coming to town or they're considering this law, they can look at to see if the field next to their house is going to be allowed to have solar. And this doesn't lay that out.
Yeah, Harry, I mean, it would be great if we could designate every parcel that was available to have everything built. What we are able to do is to articulate the zoning districts where it's eligible and to articulate what the criteria are for consideration. Now, I think Dennis showed us that there are only a few areas that it could even be under consideration, and he articulated some of the environmental characteristics that would limit solar development even within those areas. But until you get to the ground and do the site specific, there's no way for you to know exactly where it can be built. There may be other determining factors. You know, we haven't seen where the streams are, for example, in these maps. There's just no way to literally come up with a map that says these are the only spots where it's available. But this illustration or illustrations really do show you where it's limited for consideration. I only see 5 small areas outside of the ABD. You know, keeping in mind everything west of 9G is now unavailable for ground mounted. I think it's pretty much the same areas that are available for residential development are the minimum criteria for consideration, so.
Could you, so I have a question about section D, solar energy system requirements, if we're ready to go into like language.
Yeah.
Section-
Those are your rotation items.
What thing you want to address?
Well, section D is, starts on page, so section D starts on page 4.
Page 4,
But then the part that I wanted to know about is on 5 and 6. So
okay.
number 1 addresses small solar energy systems. Number 2 is medium solar energy systems. And then 3 also refers to medium solar energy systems.
Yeah.
So I want to understand why 3 is not a subset of 2, why 3 is there at all. 2, basic for anybody following along at home, number 2 talks about how medium ground-mounted solar system, energy systems are will be considered accessory uses, so, but then 3 talks about how they could be primary, so, yeah.
Principal,
Yeah, principal.
Yeah, so this is kind of an awkward language, that's what it is. The reason for 2 sections, one was talking about it as accessory use, which is what the assumption was. And so the first one, I think, are considered an accessory use subject to site plan. What we probably should have had is a header that says medium solar systems can be either accessory or primary use, and then separated those 2 sections out, and that would make it clear. So, you know, we could do that. And that may make it easier to understand why there's 2 sections as opposed to just 1 section on medium.
I have a big problem with having small parcels that are not part of a residence and that are outlined, allowed in this medium solar energy system provided the site is larger or equal to 2 acres. I mean, that means a 2-acre lot in a community, to me, could have a solar system on it. And that to me, that's an absolute no-no. We have 2-acre lots in Linden Acres. We have 2-acre lots on my block. I don't live in the town, I live in the village. But and I can see that being that, suddenly you live in suburbia and you have a 2-acre lot of solar right next to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to recognize 2 things. One is that we're trying to enable solar where we can, for all the reasons that are good, right? That are to be able the energy independence, yada yada yada, right? So I'm not going to repeat that. But there's there's going to be some compromises that are gonna be made about the location of where solar is. If a development decides to say, well, we wanna have zero energy in this development, and they happen to have a 2-acre lot that is not desirable for putting up a house, why wouldn't it be okay for them to be able to take advantage of that property, to be able to set up solar? Just as they could use it for a wastewater treatment plant, they could use it for water towers. I mean, you know, why is solar so objectionable?
Well, I wouldn't
to that?
approve it for either, but for anything that you've suggested.
Oh,
Because
okay.
if you're in the middle of a residential community, or in a country environment, and suddenly you have 2 acres of solar next to your house, that just doesn't cut it to me. I can't imagine us allowing that.
Well, again, consider that it's just a minimum acreage subject to site plan review. And so obviously, under a scenario that you're describing, that type of an application would get, you know, a lot of scrutiny from the planning board. And we can't forget that there are screening requirements for all of these projects that are articulated in the code. So anything like that is going to have such a challenge.
Well,
from
I
a
wouldn't
screening
even want it to be
standpoint.
considered, and I wouldn't want to see it go to the planning board or anything else. I
Okay.
just wouldn't want to allow it at all.
Okay, I just would like to say we have approved sewer systems, package plants on those types of situations, as a comparison that Dennis brought up.
They're not comparable.
So, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering, so, okay, on the permitted, it's a little bit complicated, right? Because you have to kind of flip back and forth about like, where are these things permitted, and then, so like on page 3, permitted locations, talks about medium solar energy systems. I'm just sort of following Harry's train of thought here about where these things would be allowed if they were the principal use, right? If it was a ground mounted system we're talking about, right?
Right.
On a 2-acre lot. It's not allowed in the team, like, you know, I immediately thought of Hoffman when you mentioned like a development that might have a 2-acre land, because I think they're gonna have, right? I mean, it's a wetland, I guess, their main undeveloped portion, but let's pretend it wasn't, and they decided they wanted to add solar there. But it looks like medium solar energy systems aren't allowed in the TND, right? So that's not happening. I know you're kind of concerned about over where you live, but that's the HLO, Harry, right? So that pretty much knocks out a lot of that area over there. So we're talking about all the other residential zones, I guess. I'm just trying to think of where those principal use big lots might be in the town.
There's a number of 2-acre lots
Yeah, I mean, there's-
undeveloped in Linden Acres, for
Sure.
instance.
Yeah, most of Linden Acres that's undeveloped is quite wet, as we know. We've been looking at some parcels even for trails and wondering whether or not we can even use them for trails. So their suitability, you know,
Can
Linden
you
Acres
remind
is.
me, where is the, I remember reading that they're not allowed on wetlands, but where is that defined exactly? And is it a locally designated wetland? Is it federal, state, anything?
I know that there's designated wetlands based on the Army Corps of Engineers, you know, designating these wetlands, that it is prohibited, although, you know, I mean, it's disturbance of the land that in such a way that it'll affect the habitat, so I'm guessing,
It actually covers all of them. It's
Thank you.
core wetlands, state wetlands, or locally designated.
Where is that? Do you-
It's on page, well, I'm gonna give you the section number E, 1A.
Okay.
It's on my page 8, but maybe on yours.
Oh,
It's on page 9.
Yeah, it's right above the section that we
Yeah,
were talking
it's-
about where the change was made.
Uh-huh.
you know,
What was your question again, Sarah?
I'm just trying to come at the question of what it looks like to have medium-sized solar as a principal use on a 2 acre or more, is it 2 acres or more, a lot of 2 acres?
Minimum of 2 acres,
Minimum
it
of 2
says.
acres, right?
Yeah.
In a residential area, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. And, you know, Robert mentioned that a lot of flooded acres is wet, and I know a lot of areas are, but,
The other thing, just to note, that medium is up to 200 kW. So 200 kW now with technology being what it is, constitutes somewhere around 0.6 acres, depending upon how you lay it out. So that if you had a 2 acre lot, you're not talking about populating all 2 acres. You're talking about populating, you know, a portion of that.
I think the other thing to keep in consideration, we're giving a lot of license to the design review committee to make sure that it complies, whatever ground mounted systems are going to comply with screening, appropriate screening, setbacks, other things that are, you know, to minimize or to, you know, any adverse impacts in terms of view and so on. So it's not like, well, you could just, you got a 2 acre parcel, you can just do whatever you want on it. You can just put it up and concertina wire on the top of the fencing, you know. or-
would the design review committee see this though?
I
Because
think,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be the planning board that would.
But planning board.
Site
Yeah, but
plan.
they
You
only
can't-
look at things in the hamlet and the
Yeah,
Right.
HLO
where
and
it's
those
not
are
allowed.
It would have to be very specific restrictions and ground rules spelled out in here that aren't even spelled out at all, other than to rely on whatever the planning board comes up with. In the media, this is one, I saw this section here and put it down and said, no way would I approve that.
Okay, and what would the suggestion be on what they would need to look at?
I wouldn't
that's
allow
not
it.
included?
I wouldn't allow that kind of a standalone solar system that would be within a neighborhood or whatever, a residential neighborhood.
Well, there's nothing,
It doesn't say, it doesn't, it's a wide open hole in this zoning. It has no control over it. And I think it's, could be very destructive to the community, and I can't imagine what people would think of it if they see this being put in a lot next to them. I can picture 2 acres between 2 homes with somebody putting up a system on it.
well, again, just because it might meet the first initial eligibility doesn't mean it's going to be an approved application. Ted, did you want to?
You're relying on things that aren't within this zoning law. It would have to be spelled out in here. And quite frankly, by the time you spell it out from where I'm saying, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want small parcels, standalone small parcels to be used for solar systems.
So you have a recommendation for a higher minimum lot size then?
No, I wouldn't even include it. You have large, you have medium, and you have small. I wouldn't include that one at all.
I'm confused, when you say you.
There's two medium categories here. Why do we need the second one at all?
That's principal use you're talking about?
Yeah,
I'm struggling to understand, you don't want medium-sized near residential, but on the other hand, you don't want it on a vacant parcel of land that may be far away from residential?
well, I don't even know if I want to particularly put it there, but if it was not in the immediate vicinity of, I don't know, I don't know how to prevent that, or to put, if you have a subdivided area where you have parcels that are maybe 2, 5, we have many areas like that. People have subdivided their land with the intent of developing them, and then suddenly one of them becomes a solar field, even a small solar field. It would devalue the neighboring parcels. It's just.
Do you have anything to support that contention, that it would devalue
Life
neighboring
experience, that's, I mean, look at the parcels that we have in town. the layout of parcels. We've subdivided land. A lot of it's been sold, but there are places where it isn't sold.
Ted, I'm wondering if you could help us with this, two things, I guess. One, in your experience, what are other towns doing with this question of medium size? Maybe, I don't know if it's defined that way in other places, but medium size being both an accessory or a principal use, you know, does that happen? How would you recommend that we organize that section? Because I feel like it's confusing to have two separate sections that talk about medium size, but it's just me, so what's your?
Well, my experience with the different levels of review to solar systems, most other communities are now going with that same model. And the model was originally developed in Massachusetts years ago. And some communities were using that Massachusetts model here in New York before New York came up with their own model. I think it was Columbia worked with NYSERDA, and they came up with this whole model, solar zoning, but it had the same basic structure as what they were doing in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is far ahead of us. I mean, we're catching up, but they've been doing solar there for longer than we have. And so the overall structure, I think, is a sound one. It's all the details that can trip you up. And what I've seen some communities do is where they allow it as a principal use, they rely upon the minimum lot size for instance, residential, if it's a residential district. And I haven't seen communities where they've taken a minimum lot size above and beyond what would be permitted. So if 2-acre lots are allowed within an area, that would be your minimum lot size. If it's 5-acre lots, that would be your minimum lot size. And you would have to have at least that much in order to develop a medium system.
In a standalone, other municipalities are allowing small, that to my mind is a small solar system on a lot that may be in a residential community.
Yes.
They are.
Yes, they are.
And there's no,
And
not
that's,
bullets.
you know, it addresses, I think, something that people that can't develop solar on their own properties, that want to do a community solar project, that's something that would be appealing to a neighborhood that wants to get together, because they live in a forested area where they don't have good access to solar. But they have yet, a property maybe that does have good access. That would be a perfect opportunity to be able to develop a system there that could be used by a number of different homes.
So I think one of the problems for Harry is that, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'll say a problem that I would have is that the way this is written right now, it doesn't seem like number 3, the medium solar energy systems that are possibly principal uses, it's outside of the bounds of number 2, and number 2 is where you have all the language about screening and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering how the planning board would handle that if you come with an application to have a medium-sized system as a principal use. I don't see any guidance really there.
Well, so I will say that the way I think that they put this together is that it's together with the conditions in D2.
Do
right?
you read it that way? Because I'm
Yeah,
okay.
and I think perhaps
Yeah.
I could think of a way to word this so that, it overcomes that perhaps textual issue, but I think it's meant
Yeah.
to add this additional layer onto the other requirements, except for the one that says it's not a principal use.
Yeah, okay, I
So
see
it
that
could
here
be
now.
rewritten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I wonder, why not just say in number 2, medium solar energy systems are considered an accessory use except under the following condition, see, you know what I mean? See,
I think we could
something
rewrite
like
it.
that. I mean,
different
rather
way.
than
There's
having
more
2
than one way
separate
to approach
sections,
it.
why not have one
Yep.
section that talks about medium solar energy systems?
I think it could be rewritten.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
It
That's
just,
a pretty
Yeah,
simple.
we could rewrite it, and then really it's just that if it's a principal use, there's an additional layer of requirement, which is a minimum size, right?
I wouldn't
Yeah.
allow it on the principal use on small parcels like that, period.
Well, that's a
And nobody's
substantive question.
convinced me that
Right,
that's it.
that's a different question, a
That's a
substantive
yeah.
question that is not the sort of
Mhm.
drafting issue that I think Sarah's raising, yeah.
I mean, that's my only issue with it. I mean, besides the question, the moral question of whether we allow those size systems on as principal uses, I just feel like it's confusing to have those two separate things. But if you don't agree, then that's fine. I just wanted the professional opinion. What do you think?
I just wanted those two suggestions, which are good suggestions,
Rewording. To combine.
the rewording. I just wonder if that's something that we can, have them do between now and the next meeting, but still consider having a public hearing so that we can get more input, because we are running up against a timeline for our municipal solar project. And if you felt that you could do it without changing the substance, then we could, obviously advertise what those wordsmithing changes are.
What is that timeline? I didn't realize we were on a time clock.
I'm sorry, I thought I made that clear. Yep, we do have to in January sort of make a final determination on whether or not we're going forward with our municipal solar project. And so,
I wouldn't want the term or the word principal use and what that means in here, period. It's small, to have anything other than a large solar system in a remote area and on a principal use, that's one thing. But once you allow this to be among homes and whatever in a residential neighborhood, I would be totally against it.
okay, well, thank you, Harry, but of course, that is part of the planning process where the folks in the neighborhood can come and they might feel differently. They might say, I would love to have one of these in my community. I would love to be able to participate in a nearby community solar project. I think Dennis gave a good example of a historic home. I know I have a very old farmhouse, and fortunately I do have a farm building I can put it on, but I certainly would prefer to put it on the historic house that I have. So, that's the public process, is to be able to get some input, and we can, obviously continue to wordsmith, but it would be nice to get some public input. Once again, I would certainly encourage that we take the draft that we have, the direction that you've given to the attorney and to the planner on, just working on a little bit of the wording in those instances, and any other thoughts you have. And let's also hear from the public. It's been such a long time we've been working on these drafts. And I know Jim feels the same as I do about this, that it's time to hear from our public.
Well, I don't think we have anything adequate to show them before we have, in terms of having a public hearing on it. I think that issue has to be addressed, and quite frankly, when I got to that issue, when I read this thing, and initially, that upset me to the point where I stopped reading.
Okay. Well, thank you, Harry, but I know you've had essentially, this draft now for weeks upon weeks, and, we do need to continue moving
No,
forward.
we haven't. I got it the night before the last meeting.
Okay.
Middle of the
Here,
night.
here again, is the plan on it from Dutchess County, their recommendations for solar zoning, and, when you read their recommendations, you could see that what's being proposed is really well thought out and incorporates a lot of what they recommend. And if anything, it's a little bit more restrictive because they suggest only keeping these systems off of prime soils and not soils of statewide importance.
There were two of these they published. One maybe about a year ago that was quite strident about allowing solar put in. This one has a number of additional watch out fors compared to the original one. I've read both of them over a few times, and I think as time goes on, this has to be very carefully thought out in a community of residential people, in residences, before we spoil the quality of life. Once we've gone to the great lengths to preserve the community.
Okay, thank you, Harry. I mean, I recognize that, but obviously, you know, the folks in the Virgin Islands and Barbuda and Puerto Rico, I think, are worried about
They have
things,
different-
including aesthetics, but they're worried about resiliency and also addressing climate change while there's even time to do so. So I think we've worked on this for a year and a half. You've been certainly a part on almost a weekly basis of, you know, discussing, you know, proposed solar zoning. Meanwhile, it continues without proper guidelines in our community, and it would be nice to hear from the public.
Ted, what's your view of how this fits in with the rest of our zoning? Do you feel like the way it's written, you know, we'll be able to implement it easily with the planning board if we don't make further changes? Like what, I get the feeling, I think we took, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, we sort of took a model and then we tweaked it according to what we, I mean,
So-
maybe at this point it's so far from the model that we just.
No, it's not.
It's not, right?
Actually, it's
Yeah.
not. And, I mean, I look back at the PACE model and I was just looking today, Lori, you know, sent me a copy of the CUNY model, solar zoning, and it's almost, there's significant sections that are almost identical to what we had put in this one, which I had, you know, I started with a very, very rough draft, and, you know, obviously Ted and Chris had contributed to this.
Victoria.
Well,
She did all the work.
and so Ted, you know, contributed to making this conform where he saw those other areas, and based on that experience with the other communities, which I'm glad that he's here to be able to explain. But this is not something we just imagined and
Yeah.
said, let's put
Right.
it down. This is really.
So how
Thank
do
you
you
all.
feel that it fits with the rest of our zoning?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, because of the site plan approval requirements, that's something that the board is familiar with. There are some additional requirements in here that the board would have to consider for any solar zoning. But the basis is already there. They're already dealing with special permits for any large sites that come in. Procedures are going to be the same. And the kinds of issues that are addressed, they're going to have to look at all of the requirements of site plan approval. Unless it involves a farm and an ag district where expedited site plan approval
Right.
would be granted. Otherwise, they've got to look through the code just as they would today for any other use.
And do you have an opinion about where I feel like this law is sort of trying to walk that line between the comprehensive plan, which really talks about a lot about protecting community character, quality of life here, and this mandate to, you know, increase opportunity for what's the word, renewable energy in our community, you know, so we're sort of walking that line, right, between trying to encourage solar but
Yeah.
maintain quality of life. How do you,
Yeah.
as a planner, I feel like hopefully you have a better sense of the town as a whole than some of us working, you know, how do you feel it
I don't
does
know if
for
I have a
that?
better sense of the town than you guys do. You're dealing with it
Well,
day
you've
in
worked
and
with
day
our
out,
zoning for a
but-
long time.
No, I
though,
work,
yeah.
yes, of course.
And
I
other
work for a lot
places
of-
too, so.
Yeah, and a lot of other communities too. And,
Yeah,
you know,
I would like to see well-established and set by law in this zoning, setbacks from the front of property, from the road, no matter where they are. What, they should not be part of the flora and fauna. They don't fit in, and the flora and fauna come first. And that's what establishes the quality of life here. And I would want this to be, if there was a substantial acreage, even a large one, along Route 9 or somewhere, no matter where it is on a road, I would want it back, out of sight as much as possible, and set back substantially from the highways.
Again, Harry, there's very strong screening language. I mean, almost oppressive screening language that's in this zoning code. But Ted, you didn't get a chance to answer the question from Sarah, so I'm wondering if we
Yeah.
can give you a second chance to do so.
It's walking a line, there's no question about it, because so many rural communities, they do want to pursue renewable energy, they want to, you know, put their towns in the right direction, but they're concerned, you know, they're very concerned, rightly so. I mean, solar panels there's plenty of examples out there where they were put right on the roads, you know, and you've got these reflective panels, and you've got scenic roads and scenic view sheds and everything else, and they're in the wrong places. But, you know, with any zoning change, it's never permanent. You can come back in a year and revisit it. You find that there are tweaks that you need to do with it. And I've seen other communities do exactly that. They put it in place, they test it out, because we don't have, you know, it's not a huge body. It's not like every community has got zoning today. Every community doesn't have solar provision, so it is a relatively new thing. And I've seen a lot of communities go back and they refine it, sometimes 2 and 3 years in a row until they get it right. And I think if you look at it from that standpoint, that this is not the be-all, end-all, it gets your foot in the door, it gets you started on the road to being able to enable homeowners and business owners in the town to be able to take advantage of free energy, basically.
So, like, not to put you on the spot, but and I don't want you to feel like you're, I don't know, having to give a difficult opinion or something, but I guess I'm wondering, I feel like a lot of us would be more comfortable having a law that allows solar, but is maybe a little bit more conservative.
More stringent.
For now, you know, with that view, like, you know, with a lot of zoning, if a really amazing project comes up and we realize, oh, we wrote it in such a way that we just can't allow this really amazing project that should totally be allowed, and then we can revise, or, you know, there's reasons why we could go back and change it to be looser or less restrictive, but I think people are a little worried about providing opportunity for there to be a big, I mean, obviously all zoning is a risk, but you know what I'm saying, like a big risk of having suddenly fields of solar or something.
Yeah.
I get the feeling it's pretty restrictive, but do you feel like we're opening ourselves up to any, like, are there any holes here that you would say you might take a look at?
Well, I've seen other towns where they've opened up more of the community than
here.
you're willing to do here, and
Okay.
you already have a lot of protective mechanisms in place, especially along the Hudson, the whole area west of 9G.
Yeah.
You're protecting ag lands, you're protecting wetlands. I mean, there's certainly more that you could do, no question about it. Some towns have gone with an approach where they really value their natural resources. And so, just for example, you have conservation subdivision built into your subdivision regulations, and that has a resource mapping requirement. So before you subdivide land, you take a look at where your valuable resources are, not just natural, but also cultural resources, your stone walls and your scenic views and that sort of thing. Some communities require that sort of an analysis for solar. So what they do is they, even though they have the conservation subdivision process in place, they call it conservation design. And they use that to drive the right places for solar, to be able to accommodate all the other resources that you've protected. And there certainly are others. You know, there's, I think from the standpoint of wildlife, I know you mentioned that, you want to think about fencing. You know, if you're going to have a large solar area, you know, is that going to restrict wildlife activities? We had a whole study that was done with Cornell University a few years ago about wildlife corridors in the community. That might be something that could be folded into it also.
And this is exactly the kind of stuff that the planning board knows to consider. We've left, again, going back to those maps, we've left so few areas now that even meet the let's take a look at it test for solar installation. Most of what I'm hearing is that it's too restrictive. From the folks at the CAC I spoke to very briefly, Lori and I exchanged some correspondence on this. I know that when I talk to the community at large, they want to see us work on getting community solar, something that they're very passionate about. And so I think that these are tools that our planning board is used to referring to when they do site plan review and special permit review. I think it's nearly impossible to map every single situation, every single parcel.
Did you guys, during the intermunicipal task force process, did you talk about this conservation subdivision idea?
No, I don't think we did, but again, if you look at what remains on that map, there's very little, most of it's forested. You know, so like the location for our municipal solar project is on the well fields. It's ideal because it's already open, can't be used for other things. Sky Park most of it is actually forested, but it has an area that's being maintained at openness. There's very few places, if I had to guess, there's 5 or 6 locations in town that would actually meet the criteria for having a large-scale solar. Whether they will actually have it is another question.
What do you think about this question of fencing?
Fencing is done for safety, protection on the larger size units. It's really for the protection of the units. It's a substantial investment. Also, from a safety, vandalism, and fire protocol, fencing is actually dictated by the code. It's not an option that we can entertain. Right. So that's a good point. So if something comes up where the project is proposed in that critical biodiversity habitat area, and there are a couple of areas that were identified, the planning board will say, well, wait a second. If you're doing this, means that a fence has to be created. Where's the fence gonna be? Where are the deer? Where are the coyotes gonna go around? What is that impact? And they have to assess that as part of the secret process. But for us to be able to go ahead and analyze all those parcels right now,
Sure.
that's unrealistic.
No, I
But
just
none of
wondered
these
about
things
requiring
address
the fencing.
what I've been talking about here, with this medium-sized, standalone parcels. And that by the time you do everything you're talking about, you have really created a major eyesore in a residential area. And that's what this is opening that up to.
Well, again, we can agree to disagree, Harry, because there's very stringent screening language in this. So that, of course, is what the planning process is to take into account what the people of the particular neighborhood or community would like to see. And you may be surprised that those people in that neighborhood come out. If there is a new development, if Hoffman were to come in and say on this neighboring residential parcel, we would like to have a small solar farm to power our development, those people may come in and say, I like that idea. I think that's a great idea. We must take action on a local level. We must take action as individuals if we're actually going to address this issue of climate change.
So with the fencing, so it seems like with the large scale, I know if we don't have an option not to fence, that's understandable, but it looks like the planning board could determine what type, so then, like I remember Eric Kiviat coming to a public hearing in Milan about a deer fence and talking about how the snakes wouldn't be able to get through, and how he was concerned about that. If that becomes something where, we know from that wildlife habitat connectivity study that there's certain types of small, I suppose the planning board, it looks like has the flexibility to say, you have to have fencing, but it needs to be a size or a type that would permit this type of wildlife to continue to connect, right? Could we,
Well,
is that
there's,
enough flexibility?
there is a lot of fencing that's been designed specifically for wildlife
Right.
movements. And I don't know enough about it to know whether or not it's something that could be applied here because of the building code requirements.
okay.
It's something I'd have to do a little more research.
It says planning board shall determine the type of fencing, so it sounds
Yeah.
like
Yes,
maybe
So
they're able
They're in
to.
charge of that.
there's flexibility.
And with the medium scale though, it says, it seems like fencing is talked about as an option. So is there anything we ought to add there under E2E, D2E, that somehow it says fencing or other screening that will harmonize with the character of the property and surrounding area? Should we say anything about wildlife connectivity there, or? I'm not sure whether I know the planning board realizes it's a priority, but
I trust the planning board to consider that. They're required to consider it as part of seeker. take a look at all the elements, which will be site-specific, project-specific.
So what about this, what's it called, conservation subdivision?
Conservation design.
Yeah, the conservation design. I like the idea of having a little bit more of a planning process as you look at some of these lots that might have the medium scale. You know, really having that be required as your process.
There's certainly no preclusion from the planning board of doing that. I think they do that with every project that comes in front of them, whether it's residential subdivision or whatever. They start with a conservation design mentality. They take a look at the constraints of a property. It's just their normal protocol, and then they look to see whether or not what improvements, quote unquote, are being proposed and where they're located on that property, and whether that's the most appropriate location on that parcel for that type of improvement. So I would trust them to take a look at that here and to consider that as well.
Well, most the buildings are built on subdivisions, except property that's already been subdivided, and it's subdivided with a location on the plot for the house and the septic and whatever. So you know, you have it pretty much laid out in advance, even when you buy the property. And this would be a piece of property that somebody, even the way it's worded, would buy one of those parcels and put photovoltaics on it. I don't know how that would, if that was, if it had already passed. How about a parcel? How about a parcel that's already been part of a subdivided area, where you have maybe a 5 or 10 acre parcel, and the site plan, as when it was subdivided, sets the location for the house and the garage and the septic, etc. How is that going to fold into this? I'm asking you, Ted.
I'm sorry, Harry, I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Well, if we have a subdivided plots, although we have many of them in town that have been subdivided, they frequently call for the location for the house and for the ancillary parts of the development, and it's pretty much spelled out. Then how does the solar zoning, if somebody has a parcel like that and said, well I want to put a medium solar field on it.
So you're saying if they already had site plan approval from the planning board?
Well, the site plan would have been part of the subdivision.
Okay, so it shows on the lot,
Yeah.
locations and so
Mhm.
forth.
Yeah,
Well, that's a,
it's an empty parcel.
yeah.
I mean, this says it's an empty parcel, and then you know, how does that dovetail into this? You know, does that mean it's precluded from any putting photovoltaics on it, even if it's an empty parcel? I would hope so. Yeah.
I'm not sure it would preclude it as long as they received site plan approval.
They would have to come back to
But it
amend
would
the
have to
site
come back
plan,
to
is
the
that what
planning
you're
board.
saying? To
Well, I don't
amend the
know,
site
I
plan?
don't know.
They would have to come back.
Well, I would hope they would, I would
Yeah.
hope that they have an approval to do one thing, and to put a medium solar system on it would be precluded, then I would hope,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Without-
Would be precluded, this legislation at least would say that it would come back for site
Right.
plan approval of this new thing, right?
Well, I mean,
Well, I mean,
you're the boss.
Well, I mean, as written, I think
Yeah.
that it would, as it's been written, it would say for medium, that it would be subject to site plan review. So that, you know, particular lot would be subject to site plan review
Right.
for this
Okay,
proposed
so
use.
then that would be available, that lot would be available for solar, the way this is written, you're
Any
saying?
lot's available for anything, right?
Well,
I mean, as
Well-
long as it's permitted in the zone and it goes through the approval process that your code dictates, right? Just because it got a prior approval for one thing doesn't mean you can't go back and get a different approval for something else as long as it's a permitted use, right?
that just makes me all the more jaundiced about them.
Well,
Well, you know, there are some economic considerations, Harry. The reason that we don't have any applications in the town for a medium-sized system is because you still have to pay upgrade costs. So the likelihood of having a medium-sized system being constructed in places that you might find them to be objectionable is, I think, very low. You saw the.
It's not zero though.
It's not zero. You saw the distribution lines. The minute you get off those distribution lines, you're paying a significant amount of money, which is why we're fortunate that the project we are looking at is, right next to three-phase for our municipal project. Again, there are, no projects being proposed right now, or even inquired. There hasn't been one person who has come into town hall to ask about a medium-sized solar project since I've been here, anyway. So it's been the large-scale projects where there's the economy of scale that a developer can come in, and I think we've really nailed down where it's even to be considered in this code.
What is, Lori, does CAC have an opinion that they wanna share with us at this point? Or do you have an opinion? I know you.
I think we submitted our, very
Did you?
brief as it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was, we need some solar zoning, and this is some solar zoning.
No. The details are where life is all about.
I believe, not to put you on the spot, but is it possible that the CAC thought this was restrictive, too restrictive? Okay, I put you on the spot, all right.
Has the CAC read this?
Yeah, we did not take a vote.
What we have tonight.
But yeah, there were opinions in the room that this would preclude some people who would want to put up solar from putting up solar. But it's a start.
Primarily, there are districts in which this precludes solar.
The positive outcome from that meeting that we had to discuss this was that regardless of the differences of opinion about how restrictive it was, we needed to make a statement and have solar zoning, which we can tune, just as it was pointed out, it can be changed at a later date, but we need to be able to have solar zoning in place to even address this. If we're waiting for the perfect one and you have 10 different opinions, nothing's ever gonna get done, right? So you need to say, well, is this close enough for us to say it's okay enough for us to be able to then present to the public? I think that for them to weigh in, I think that, yeah, I think 18 pages on being able to discuss solar zoning or to determine whether or not can be allowed is sufficient. There was enough detail and thought. And there were hours of debate and discussion about it. Those things that weren't agreed upon, we basically need to go to a higher authority, which would be the town as a whole, and let them weigh in and then reconsider those changes that need to be made to it. But,
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more specific questions that anyone has? I think you know how I feel. I'd like to hold a public hearing at the next meeting. I know Jim has shared his thoughts with you on that. But obviously we would need at least a consensus of the board to hear from the public at our next meeting, November 14th. We don't have a meeting for another 3 weeks. That would certainly give us even more time for wordsmithing.
I wouldn't want to set a public hearing until we were very comfortable with the zoning. And I, for one, could not vote for this.
Okay, thank you. I'm very comfortable, and we need some more opinions down here on the other side.
Well, I'm okay, I mean, it's close enough for government work, like
Okay.
he says, but I think that the question's gonna arise is that, well, why are you insisting on medium principal use for solar if everybody's saying nobody can do it? Why do we even bother having the law then?
I I never said it. Nobody-
Well, I mean, the law is requesting medium solar as a principal use, 2 acres and above. And so why do we even have it in the law if everybody's saying it'll never happen, no, it won't, nobody wants to do it?
Actually, I didn't get that out of the discussion, that principal use, 2-acre zoning for medium solar couldn't be used for principal use. There's nothing that we've said in here, it's just the different levels of restriction. And it's to understand what it is as opposed to accessory use is really what defines those two criteria. One would be the consumption of that energy within some kind of an entity, like a private, development and so on. And then the idea of principal use in a particular parcel where that energy could be consumed by multiple entities. So it's more of a commercial use of the, the
It might be hard to
that's
sell
open.
for the community, they might be okay with small and large, but not, be a little cautious about the medium.
Well, like it goes back to that development again, if you have a small development come in and they want to have the parcel next to it or the undeveloped portion, which is a separate parcel, and it would be a separate parcel, by the way. It's important from when you think about like having a solar development or a project, they often are separated from the residential homes. So you would want that parcel to be the principal use. And I apologize if I made it confusing. I just said, from what I know of the projects, that the large size and the small ones are the ones that are getting built and are being proposed by overwhelming numbers. It's not that there aren't any this size that are getting constructed or being proposed, but they're just a very small percentage.
I'm wondering, okay, a couple things. One, do you feel like we could set a public hearing if we are gonna tweak that language about medium?
I've got some language for you if you'd like to do
So we
that.
could talk about that, and if we can come to an
Yeah.
agreement and people wanna move it ahead, we're okay.
Yeah.
Okay, second question.
I couldn't hear what you said.
It's okay.
She asked whether or not we could go ahead and set a public hearing if we still needed to tweak language, and I said, well, I can give you language tweaks right now for purposes of that discussion.
The
if you
discussion we were
want to
having
move
about
forward.
the medium size,
Right.
the two sections of medium sized solar, like we could put that all into one.
The two text comments we had today, we can go ahead and
Well,
make
it
those
depends
now.
on how that's written, I'd have to see it.
Well, I can read you a proposal.
But, okay, so that, the other thing was, why not allow small ground mounted systems in the TND? Why not? Just curious. Any thoughts?
I can answer.
No, not you. We've heard enough from you. We know why you don't want it.
Well, no.
Carrie, wait, just-
We wrote the zoning there for a specific reason, it'd be
Okay.
very contrary to that zoning.
Sure. But, like for example, with Houghton is, an obvious, but also, there are lots there where having, say, a 1 acre medium size or a small ground mounted system, I don't know. If you abide by all the other restrictions, why not allow it? I'm just wondering, what was the reasoning?
I think that falls under the category, some people feel this is more restrictive language than it ought to be.
Okay.
On the other hand, again, one of the things that I'm relying on is that local government has this thing, the zoning board of appeals, that allows someone to go in and go back and say, I understand it's restricted, but I have a specific use case where I would like to put this in. It's not interfering with anybody's view. It's gonna be on a piece of property in this particular
I
location.
don't think the ZBA could address that though, if it's
I thought-
specifically prohibited in a district. I don't.
It would be a use variance, which
So
is a
it's
very difficult
it's very,
threshold.
so the
Yeah,
use
Very
difficult
unlikely.
threshold. And my answer to Sarah's question is, in the spirit of compromise, knowing that we have some very divergent views on solar on this town board, that, and the TND was, in fairness, was meant to be a dense district, where we would encourage both commercial and dense housing.
is the answer.
Harder to screen it, in other words,
Well,
if it's developed as fully
harder
as
to,
you
harder,
expect.
harder to screen it, and there's some sensitivity, extreme sensitivity perhaps, but on the aesthetic of solar panels, you know, by at least one of our town board members, and so in the spirit of compromise to get something on the books that we could figure out if it's too restrictive or a little too loose, you know, and take a look at it in the future. as we
The
do with all
intent
of
of
our
the TND was to have a quarter-acre panel, parcels, and very small parcels, to have density. It's not a big area, it's only, you know, a couple hundred acres total. And it would just, it would destroy the use of the land for the purpose that it was created.
What about, again, under that medium energy system section, what about what Ted said about, you know, how the minimum lot area is 2 acres, right? But what about, I think you said some towns just do it by whatever the minimum lot is for that district. So if you're in the R1.5, you might have a 1.5 acre-ish parcel, right?
Right.
Is there any reason to make it that rather than saying the 2 acre minimum? Just, since you said that the amount of kilowatts that it, you know, the amount of space it needs anyway to achieve the limit there for a medium-sized system might well fit on a 1.5 acre parcel.
So there I would go to the ZBA and say that there may be situations that they could go to get an area variance, which is much easier to attain, not easy to attain.
Sure, but easier.
Easier, and then just, you know, if you look at the, what I would call the leftover zoning districts from, you know, way back when, R1.5, R3, R5, it wouldn't necessarily be districts that we would design today with those types of minimum lot requirements. That would be my response on that one. But I would certainly entertain and keep in mind the expansion of ground mounted in the TND if others thought so for new developments. I would certainly consider that in the future. That would be my sentiment. But for now, in the spirit of compromise, it would be nice to move something forward so we can regulate, as Dennis says, because right now there's no guidelines. Well, should we hear your language and see if we're interested in setting a public hearing for the November 14th?
Sure, so
Okay.
you had, starting with language on page 5, in section
I'll figure out where I put my
D,
code.
right, page 5, section D,
I have to hunt for this one.
right, D1C, I'm sorry, D2, where we're talking about medium solar energy systems. So in
On
that
page
section.
5, D2?
D carries over to big D, solar energy system requirements.
Oh, okay.
2, medium solar energy systems. So if you cross out in that paragraph, considered an accessory use, so it now says medium solar energy systems are subject to site plan review and approval prior to construction, installation, or modification under the following conditions.
Okay.
Okay, we go to the next page, and in section C on the next page, we're gonna change section C so that it now reads, if the solar energy system is the principal use of the property, comma, the site must be larger, or, 2 acres, excuse me, the site must be 2 acres or larger, okay? So if it's the principal use, it must be 2 acres or larger,
Okay.
all right? And then keep going down that page, section 3, where it used to talk about principal use, cross it off. It's not necessary because we've incorporated into the prior section. And then
Okay.
section
And that one,
4,
sorry, Chris,
I'm
just
sorry.
before you go on,
yes,
are you suggesting cross off 3 and A?
3 and 3A, yes,
Okay.
all of that gets crossed off because it's been incorporated in the prior section.
Okay,
And then the 4 there becomes a 3,
okay,
all right, because we eliminated the 3.
okay.
Then we go on to the comment on page 9, in big E, requirements for all solar energy systems. In 1B, and I'm gonna read this and then you're gonna tell me if this is what you meant, okay? A ground-mounted solar system shall not be installed on important farmland as defined in 143-4 in the ABD and, cross off, except on non-farm parcels or. So it says in the ABD and, if on a farm,
Yes,
cross off where,
okay.
and insert only consistent with a farmland protection plan as defined in section 143-4, cross off has been. So that it says, only consistent with the farmland protection plan as defined in 143-4, prepared in accordance with this zoning law, period. Okay? Do you want me to read the whole sentence again?
Please.
Yeah.
A ground-mounted solar energy system shall not be installed on important farmland as defined in 143-4 in the ABD, and if on a farm, and comma, if on a farm, comma, only consistent with a farmland protection plan as defined in section 143-4, prepared in accordance with this zoning law.
Can I just ask, why is in the ABD not before that as defined in 143-4?
Well, I just looked at where it was, but
Yeah.
I think that probably would be
That
better.
probably
So
should
you're
be,
saying
yeah.
in the ABD as defined, no, well, it's not the ABD, it's in important farmland as
Yes.
defined in 143-4.
Yes.
Do you want in the ABD to be installed in the ABD on important farmland?
Sure. Does that
So
make
in the
sense?
ABD moves over to shall not be installed in the ABD on important farmland? Does that
Sure,
make more sense?
Sure.
Okay, so a ground-mounted solar energy system shall not be installed in the ABD on important farmland as defined in 133-4. And if on a farm, only consistent with a farmland protection plan as defined in 133-4, prepared in accordance with the zoning law. Would probably be wordsmithed a little
Yeah,
better, but I
a
think
little
it
bit, but it's, yeah,
gets the,
gets the
Okay.
is that what you expected?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the two changes that I think you discussed today.
And then the only other thing I noticed, yeah, what section was that?
Well, I wanted to talk about what Chris just did.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Harry, go ahead.
Okay, so, have you used the word medium in that as well? This is in the medium
So
category.
E, we're on page 5 in E, and we're talking about all solar energy systems.
Right.
So regardless of
The size.
where it is or the size, we're talking about requirements for important farmlands in the ABD.
Okay, so that would still allow a medium system, standalone system, smaller system.
Well, wait, where are you? That section E was only relating to ABD, Harry, so did you want to go back to the other section?
Well, medium starts on page 5.
Okay, is that where you are? Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And that, and did you, where does that say, standalone?
Sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
The language
The
that
medium language under 3
Yeah,
permits it as a principal use of a parcel.
yeah,
So, as small as 2 acres.
yeah.
Okay, what size parcel are we talking about here? Where does the medium-sized parcel start in size?
As she read, section C would now read, if the solar energy system is the principal use of the property, the site must be 2 acres or larger. That's her proposed
Okay,
language
so
change.
you're lowering,
I'm
and.
just reorganizing the section, I'm not
Yeah.
really changing any of the substance.
Okay,
Okay.
now, does the medium system, did the medium system before go down to 2 acres? I have a problem with that too.
Harry, you said that earlier, you had the problem with that. That is the minimum for the medium system.
In other words, that wasn't changed, I'm not changing the substance of that provision, I'm just reorganizing the section there.
We just reorganized it so it's all in one area.
I realize that, but I want to know what the, on page 5, under 2, medium solar system, what size is set for a medium solar system before you change the wording as you just did?
It was 2 acres, and it still is 2 acres as a minimum.
No, it's only 2 acres when you get down to the bottom, the one that was removed.
Right, but we put the 2 acres in C instead.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so under C, you reworded C to
Yes,
say
yes.
2 acres minimum.
Right, exactly right.
The
Where
proposed
it's-
language
Where
is,
it's a permitted use. I mean,
if
where
the
it's a-
solar energy system is the principal use of the property, the site must be 2 acres or larger.
Okay, so we're allowing 2 acre parcels, no matter where they are with this, to be used for solar, for as a principal use of the land.
If
to be
they
solar.
are in the zoning districts that Ted enumerated, that they are a permitted use.
Yeah.
They first
Okay.
have to be a
Well, I
permitted
already know
use.
what that is.
Right, okay,
Mhm.
to be clear.
All right,
And that's less than 25% of the land mass available in our township.
it's not, that isn't, my problem is where it is, and where it's likely to be. And where it's likely to be is where there's substantial subdivision of land, where there's likely to be substantial residences. And that's something that is a big problem for me.
Okay?
To put solar in College Park and in Linden Acres and,
Okay.
I found that,
Redundancy, I'm sorry. What page is that?
Mine says, it's
Page
top
what?
of page 9.
Page 9. There was a sentence that got essentially printed twice. The same point got printed twice. Page 9?
Page 9, it would be D, small d.
Yeah.
All solar energy systems that are connected to the electric distribution or transmission system shall obtain.
E1D. E1D is where we are on page 9.
yeah, that's what he's been reading so far, not just what
Right.
I have there.
Right, with the applicable electric utility, then it says solar energy systems connected directly with the distribution or transmission must obtain interconnection agreement. One of those needs to go. That's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sentence was printed twice.
And then,
Lost in typing.
So the second sentence is what you want to delete, Danny?
yeah, I don't think there's
The
any.
difference is one says applicable electric utility, and the other says interconnecting electric utility.
Probably the interconnecting should stay, actually.
Oh.
So get rid of the
Then you
first
have
one.
two
first one,
interconnections,
probably.
though,
Yeah,
that sentence.
because
that
you
seems
said
to
shall
change.
obtain an interconnection agreement with the applicable electric utility.
I think the first
As
sentence
opposed
is
to
kind of
with the
cleaner.
interconnecting electric utility.
That's fine.
Applicable
Yeah.
probably makes more sense, right?
The first one's fine.
If it reads, it's clear, the second, we'll remove the second one.
Okay.
So that one's out.
There was a,
I think that's
That's it.
it. Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your quick
thinking on their feet.
thinking on your feet and your suggestions. Might we consider folks for bringing this forward to the public for consideration? Ted, did you want to say something?
Fencing? This is, that's on page 7, it's subsection H.
Okay.
And if you wanted to address the issue of wildlife, the third sentence there, the planning board shall determine.
What letter was that?
This
H,
is sub
H?
page 7?
Yep.
Shall be enclosed by fencing. So the third sentence there, the planning board shall determine the type of fencing, giving due consideration to wildlife movements, something like that.
Giving due consideration to wildlife movement. That's great. Okay, so this way it'll be specifically enumerated in the code. I like that addition.
I mean, should we, that's under large, what about, I realize that's the only section where fencing is required, but what about an E in the previous section where it talks about screening and includes fencing, since it might not be required, but is there any reason not to add that clause in there somewhere too? Like, it says, solar energy system is screened through the use of architectural features, earth berms, landscaping, fencing, or other screening that will harmonize blah, 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 surrounding area. I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense there, but.
Well, this is small here.
Well, it's, yeah, medium, right?
Small and
Yeah, it's medium.
What sets the maximum size of the medium system?
200, yeah, KW, which is, again.
The power output, not the ground coverage.
That's right.
Right.
There's maximum in the ground coverage as well.
I don't know what that equals in terms of ground coverage.
0.6 acres with current technology.
0.6.
0.6 acres. So that'd be less than a third of the property if there were to be an exactly 2 acre parcel.
I think let's not worry about it over there. I think it's probably small enough, it probably doesn't matter.
Wait a minute. A 2 acre parcel would only have 0.6 acres of coverage on it? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, because our municipal one is 10 times that size, and that's slated for 6 acres now, or that a tad over 6 acres.
I mean, where's the criteria, where's the logic of the criteria for these different sizes then between medium and large?
Well, it can give you the measurements of a solar panel and what the rated output that's typical for it, and you can do the math. I mean, it's really, we're talking 320 watt panels that are approximately 3 feet wide by 6 feet long.
That's today.
And there's 2 of them. Right, they'll get smaller.
Mhm.
So the density will actually continue to contract. I mean, so that's a good thing, right? I mean, that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
No,
hopefully, just think of the satellite dishes of yesteryear, right?
I remember
That took up the.
Usually one down the road
Okay.
on 9G from till recently.
Well, we are approaching 10 o'clock, and I'm going to put it out there again. Might we consider setting a public hearing for November 14th and getting input? I think we've had some great Q&A, some great changes to wordsmithing.
If you do that, could I ask you to consider first a resolution establishing the agency?
Exactly.
And a resolution establishing the game?
Exactly.
I think we should continue discussing this for another meeting at least.
Okay, Harry, we can certainly continue to discuss. In fact, that's a great thing to do during a public hearing, is to discuss and take into account the thoughts of the public. But I would like us to at least have that opportunity to hear from the public as we go to finalize something, and hopefully in time for our municipal solar project. So I would entertain the idea that we go forward and set a public hearing November 14th, but first do a resolution establishing the town board as lead agency. So I would like to go ahead and make that motion, the resolution being resolution number 72, or a resolution establishing lead agency with regard to the adoption of local law D of 2017, and an environmental assessment form has been prepared on October 6th. The town has determined the proposed project to be a type 1 action. We've determined that the action will occur within New York State Agricultural District, and therefore the requirements of those districts apply. Whereas after examining the EAF, the town board has determined that there are no other involved or federal agencies on this matter. And the interested agencies include our planning board and the county department of planning and development, which have review but not approval responsibilities. Now therefore be it resolved, the town board hereby authorizes the supervisor to discharge any secret responsibilities as are required in this regard. Be it further resolved that a determination of significance will be made at such time as all information has been reviewed by the town board to enable it to determine whether the action will or will not have a significant effect on the environment. That's resolution 72. And I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Bill. Is there any further discussion on lead agency? If not, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. So, shall we tackle
I'm gonna give you the clerk, the markup.
the marked up draft? Thank you very much. Would you like us to tackle part one now first, or shall we do the notice of public hearing? Chris?
That was part one you looked at as part of the,
Right.
if you'd like to go through that, it was a determination of lead agency.
Yeah.
We can certainly review that, but we're gonna review the determination at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Would you like to just review it quickly, or anything, you don't have it?
I don't have it with me.
Oh, I have all the docs if you'd like to. And while you're reviewing it, well, just a- oh, there she is. Why don't I go ahead and make a motion to set a public hearing for November 14th at 7:35 for all interested parties. That would be resolution number 73. November 14th, local law to amend the zoning law regarding solar energy systems, and I so move.
You said 7:45?
I think 7:35.
Second.
Thank you very much, Bill. Any further discussion? All in favor?
No.
Aye.
Aye.
And
Could
that's
you do a
the,
roll call, please?
yes,
I said no.
yes, I heard that. Okay, so we have Sarah,
Aye.
Bill,
I don't think we're ready yet.
myself, aye. Harry?
No.
Nay, thank you very much. The resolution passes. Okay. What else shall we review? Part 2 EAF?
I think you would wanna hold it
We're
to
gonna
that at
hold
the next
off until
meeting.
then?
Yeah,
Ted?
yeah. I was,
Okay.
I mean, I was prepared to go over part one EAF.
Okay,
Part two EAF is the assessment of impacts.
okay.
Um,
Would you like to, anything in particular you'd like to make note of in part 1? I mean, we've had this for a while now.
Yeah, and, you know, with any kind of an action like this, a zoning action, a lot of the information in part one is not relevant, because it has to do with specific sites. And so this focuses more on the town, and so it's heavier where it comes to, for instance, the identification of wetlands in the community, New York State DEC, state protected freshwater wetlands. It also identifies the surface water features, that identifies, you know, a number of other areas in the town where there are resources such as the coastal zone, local waterfront area, you know, DEC spills, remediation, that sort of thing. So it identifies these sorts of things now through the environmental mapper process. And so those are all within this. What else? You know, other than that, really, you know, the important parts are that it identifies the government approvals, which is what drove the designation of lead agency. But there's no other agencies that have any approval authority. Simply the review authority by the planning board and the county planning department.
Right.
That's it.
So I would note that in the resolution, the clerk is being asked to refer this
refer
to
them,
the
yeah.
planning board for their comments, together with a copy of that EAF, which is the part one, for their recommendations. And also, in your packet, with this was a coastal assessment form and an LWRP form that the planning board will be asked to review for consistency with the local waterfront revitalization plan.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good, and we should have, because we have a full 3 weeks before the next meeting, I'm sure we'll have something back from both of those interested agencies.
And I would just note that, Sue, I think you had in your packet before, the draft law that had the district schedule of use regulations attached. And the one I handed you was just the text part, but the district schedule is still part of the draft law.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
it's in
just
the
want to make sure it's all part of the
Okay.
same thing, okay?
Okay.
Very good, well, thank you all, and Ted, thank you very much, Dennis, thank you very much, all, you know, folks who have contributed over the last year and a half to trying to come up with a compromise solution for this issue, and we look forward to hearing from you again, and certainly from the public. So thanks again for your help.
Excuse me one second.
Yes,
Chris,
ma'am.
does Robert sign page 13
Yes,
on
I mean,
part one?
part one, yes, correct, exactly.
So we're going to move on to item number 6. Which is a reorg item. And we have a letter of interest from Stephen Appenzeller, who is kind enough to hang on with us tonight. Steve met with the CAC and the chair, Laura Euston, who is here, and is interested in joining and taking the vacancy spot for a term that lasts until, you can hear my,
I don't have my paperwork with me.
Okay.
I didn't realize it.
okay, fine, so I think the term.
I'll send him a notice of appointment, I'll let him know.
Okay, very good. So I believe the term is for 2019, but if it's not, I would so move that we appoint him to the term that is commensurate with the vacancy that currently exists on the CAC. How's that for language?
I'll second,
Okay?
That covers it.
All right, very good.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Stephen. We appreciate your volunteering, and we look forward to good thoughts and ideas coming out of you and the CAC. So thank you for the second, Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Okay,
Thank you for the honor of the appointment.
thank you. Well, don't thank us yet. Wait till you see all the work
Are you
involved.
sure you still want to be a part of that?
Right.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, terrific. We have a lot of board and committee reports, and I'm wondering if tonight, if we could perhaps just sort of highlight those things that may be of special interest, just because we ran a little long tonight in order to accommodate a Q&A session for one particular agenda item. So, Sarah, we'll test you out. Planning board.
All right, planning board met twice in October. They commenced or continued to review 2 applications, both in the historic overlay district, both certificates of appropriateness, and then they held public hearings for or granted conditional approval for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 projects, too numerous to detail, but those minutes are all up on the website, so if anyone's interested, it's riveting reading.
Okay.
And they're granting an extension to fulfill the conditions of approval for the preserve at Lakeskill. So that's that.
Okay. And I noticed that Hannaford has an application to change the color of the building, replace the existing signage in the front of the building, relocate the welcome sign, replace the face of the monument sign on Route 9. So I'd be interested to see what the planning board works out with them, since it's a visible location. Bill, we have a ZBA report. You've been nominated tonight because Jim's not here.
But you can find it here.
Okay, there you go.
I know I had it, I've got it already in work.
All right. We have a couple of them, I think. Okay.
But the ZBA considered an appeal by a lady on Linden Avenue, the R15 zoning district, and granted a variance that was applied for. They considered an appeal from Bard College and also granted a variance there with certain conditions. And the third appeal was by Verizon Wireless, and that was considered by the ZBA, or the ZBA. And they also granted the use variance with certain conditions. And that was at their August 9th meeting.
Terrific. Well, while you mentioned Verizon, I would just like to let you know, because the other day I was contacted by Verizon, this little tower that we have outside of my office, they were interested in also putting this microcellular antenna on that for us. I think I mentioned to you months ago they were interested. It's only a few $100s a month, but if that is something you would consider, please do let me know, and I can get back to them, and they can at least propose something to us to take a look at.
Do we pay the $200 a month?
No, they would pay us
Yeah, yeah, right.
to
that's
put
right.
that micro
Yeah, yeah.
antenna on that little mini tower that's
Yeah.
right outside my office.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, and there was an October one also, Bill?
Yes, the October ZBA report, they did a reconsideration of a decision they made on the Gaslight Motel in Upper Red Hook back in July, and they discussed it at length with the attorneys from both sides, and then they voted to reconsider the matter. They reconsidered it and then moved to dismiss the appeal due to untimeliness. And that was their action at their October 11th meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bill. You seem to be assigned a lot of reading tonight if I look through this, so
I got it.
I'll, you got it all?
Yeah, well, what do you want?
Okay, well, next up is Assessor's Office.
Well, the assessor's office has been very busy, and there were 13 homes that were, well, I got it here, I wrote it up, yeah. There were 13 homes that were sold in the town in September, and all of those were considered by the assessor's office. Interestingly enough, they found by this RPS assessor's file review that somebody had a vacant lot on our assessor's roll, but was actually a single-family residence built in 2011, so that's been fixed up and to our advantage. So anyway, she's doing a great job and is attending all the training sessions and has a very positive report for the past month.
Very good, and it's always good to hear that the real estate is improving here in the town of Red Hook and seeing so many transactions each month. Building and zoning, Bill.
Building and zoning, monthly report of October. There were 37 permits issued, 27 inspections accomplished, 42 COs and CCs considered. And the total revenue that was received was $7,664 for the month of October of 17.
Very good. It's good to see that revenue coming in. It's like you've been
Police.
assigned everything,
The
police.
police of Red Hook report for the period of October of 2017. They had a total of 74 incidents reported during the period and 9 arrests, and they issued a total of 48 tickets.
Very good. Okay, and Harry,
Okay.
we're up to you with purchasing.
All right. The biggest job we had going on in purchase of the month was the building of the tennis courts, which has moved along very aggressively, almost finished, but that's not going to be finished till spring. It's a seasonal aspect of it. And we're putting new controls in the water plant, and we're trying to purchase an updated security system. so that we'll all have a key fob.
Okay, very good, Harry, and thank you very much for keeping an eye on that tennis court project. We appreciate it. I know construction is something you're very knowledgeable about.
It's entertainment.
It's entertainment, okay, that too. Sarah, you have Water District report assigned to you tonight.
All right, the Water District report, this would be for September 2017. The amount pumped was 85,000 gallons per day. And it looks like basically all the reports came back fine. Water tests had no violations, filtration is all operating satisfactorily. And they have a list of various small projects that they're working on with the pump controls and the meter reader. But it looks like the water storage standpipe inspection took place in July. I think we talked about this before. There were no major tank deficiencies. So basically everything's going fine. Dead end hydrant flushing happened on the 17th. And other than that, everything's fine. They've got their work items list and they're working away at that.
Okay. Terrific, well, I think that we've got a few committee reports. Tree, while it's on you, Sarah.
Sure.
Okay.
So I actually just saw the tree committee out with Ken Migliarelli today, looking at Pitcher Lane. So they are finalizing their Pitcher Lane project. That will be really nice, I think. They're excited about that. There's gonna be 2 signs installed for future plantings. Excuse me, to draw attention to this work. Excuse me. They're gonna plant some bulbs, and Rotary Club is gonna help them with the Pitcher Lane project, it looks like. And they've ordered some nice books for next year's Arbor Day poster competition, so that'll be fun for the elementary school children.
Okay. Well, did you want to give your ITF report?
Well, during the weekly meetings September and October, the intermunicipal task force continued to discuss, review the proposed local law E, which has replaced the proposed local law D that regards food trucks, formula businesses, and Hamlet Business District. The task force also continues to discuss the municipal solar farms under the New York State Community Distributed Generation Program, especially as it may relate to the proposed sewer district in the village of Red Hook and as applied to the Ag Business District under Senator Green Space Plan.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. Harry, we have a rec director's report, and as always, we ask you
All right,
to...
no snoring, it's gonna take me an hour to
Okay.
read it.
All right.
But I will summarize it by saying that the tennis court is being rebuilt and has moved along very nicely. And there's all sorts of maintenance work being done and major maintenance being done on one of the ball fields that we're going to do. We do it in the fall, and that's moving along very nicely.
Very good, and I'd like to point out we're a little subcommittee working on the rec playground area. Sarah, thank you and others for joining in to help do a visioning of what might be the near future for that project, and I think we're going to hear from you pretty soon on that, right?
Yeah, we actually just met on Monday. We have a much better sort of sketch plan, so we're just refining that. And then we should have something interesting, like as visually, they do this nice, like renderings of what it could look like, so then we can show that to everybody and get a sense for what our bottom line might be. And then the fundraising subcommittee is going to be meeting shortly to talk about what our strategy will be for that. So yeah, it's all exciting.
Thank you very much. You also have a Senior Services Committee monthly report, if you'd like to make that.
Sure. So the Senior Services report for September, they continue to discuss and work closely with the new community center. And they had guests from the Rhinebeck Committee on Aging to talk about grants for remote senior exercise. And they started planning for the 2018 Senior Services Committee food drive. And then They are, what else? Working with the Red Hook School District on a senior who will be a representative on the building level team, so that's great. And I know just today, I wasn't able to make it, but they had a meeting where they had invited somebody from the Friends of Seniors Rideshare group that I think is out of Poughkeepsie, so I'm sure that'll be in their next report, but they've been very active.
Actually, yes, Susan was here from Friends of Seniors. I met with her, and that's in my correspondence or announcements.
saw
They
it.
are actually looking for volunteers. If you're not familiar with the organization, Friends of Seniors provides volunteers with a stipend, a mileage stipend for driving around those individuals in our community who need assistance getting from point A to point B. And more information can be found on their website, which I'm about to read to you, but we'll also put on our website. It's friendsofseniors@hotmail.com is the email address. Their website is friendsofseniors.biz. That's a little bit different. And so they've been a very successful organization. They have approximately 71 volunteers right now helping out, and unfortunately they need even more. So they would like any interested individual who would like to help drive folks around. So what else do we have for committees here?
There's a CAC report.
CAC, Bill, it says you're to report that for some reason.
Well, the CAC was busy staying up to date with the latest information and resources by attending training events and webinars. Included the Red Hook Future Flood Risk Vulnerability Workshop that was held here at Town Hall. 2 members attended the Land Use Leadership Alliance training program via a NYSERDA grant. And they're also working on protecting the drinking water in the Sawkill watershed. Upcoming, there's an organic waste reduction recycling potential in Dutchess County that they're considering, the New York State Association of Conservation Commissioners Conference on the Environment, and a number of matters, one at Mohawk, I guess, on November 6th, on nature across boundaries, keeping lands and waters connected. And throughout October, November, there are certain webinars and training matters that they're going to be either attending or reviewing. And their next meeting is November 8th, 7 p.m. at Town Hall.
Very good, thank you very much, Bill. And one other thing on that report is for the folks at home, a reminder that the state initiative, the Empire State Trail Plan, which the trail is slated to come over the Kingston-Rhinecliff Bridge and go up River Road, and then work its way through Bard College and into the village of Tivoli. That trail plan is in the works. There are meetings with the town supervisors and town highway departments in each leg of the plan, and that's available now on the Hudson River Valley Greenway site, if you'd like more information about that. And there'll be more forthcoming. I think we have everything from committees that we've tackled. So we're just down to correspondence, and the correspondence that I have is from the county sheriff's office, saying that they are renewing contracts with the municipalities if we were to engage their services and what the current rates are and so on and so forth. That is all I have. Does anyone else have anything they would like to share before I entertain a motion to close tonight's meeting?
No, I think we probably should congratulate both the girls soccer team and the boys soccer team from Red Hook that won their Mid-Hudson Athletic League championships this year, and are right now engaged in sectionals, so we wish them well and congratulate them on where they've achieved success so far.
Which 2 teams are?
The soccer, the boys soccer
both
and the
soccer?
girls soccer.
Great.
Both champions.
Varsity soccer, Red Hook.
And one more time, let's congratulate our Citizen of the Year, former council person, Brenda Cagle, who we had a sellout crowd, thanks Chris Shaw and the Rotary for a wonderful event last night.
2 late nights in a row.
And 2 late nights in a row, yes, exactly, Bill. I wish it was only 2 in a row. But it was just a wonderful event, and, you know, volunteering is a great thing to do for your community, if for no other reason than you get to be with other terrific individuals. So we celebrate Brenda and volunteerism with the Citizen of the Year. So with that being said, I would entertain a motion that we close tonight's meeting. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for joining us and staying with us.
Oh.